So this is something that is pretty big news that I want to discuss quickly here. The options opening up on Bitcoin and IBIT and all of the Bitcoin ETFs is bigger news than MicroStrategy, and no one's paying attention to it because it's harder to explain than MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy in no way is a small deal, and what's going on with MicroStrategy is it's phenomenal. I'm sure all of you guys are smiling right now watching your positions and your portfolio, and that's all great. But just remember, this is the very beginning of the bull run here. This is not by any stretch of the imagination the end of this particular bull run. However, the main exciting thing for me that's happened that no one's really taking any time to explain here is the options market, right? As I'm sure you're aware, the options market opened up for IBIT and for subsequently all of the Bitcoin ETFs. The reason why this is big is because there's three flywheels that are basically developing for Bitcoin, right? You've got the flywheel of capital from MSTR. And so what's happening with that is very, very simple now. I'm sure everyone understands it, especially if you watched, the last video I did with Ben. It's MSTR is borrowing money, right, in the form of convertible bonds or whatever they're doing to raise that capital, selling ATM shares or whatever. They're going and buying Bitcoin. That Bitcoin is then accreting to the balance sheet and the underlying share. It's then increasing the value of MicroStrategy, which is then allowing them to go and borrow more money. That is a flywheel effect, and it's revolving, and there's going to be different aspects of that come into that, and that's going to be, the fact that they get NASDAQ inclusion, S&P inclusion, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the second flywheel has just started, and everyone's not really thinking about how big it is, and it was phenomenal on the first day. It was a couple of days ago that started trading. And on the very first day of trading on those options on IBIT, IBIT saw $1.9 billion of volume, with 80% being call options to the long side and 20% being puts. And so just to put that into perspective, MicroStrategy for all of this time period has been getting $1 billion here, $800 million there, and they're now finally getting into, getting $42 billion. And the options on day one on one fund managed to do $1.9 billion of volume, with 80% of it being long volume. The thing that people don't understand about options is that there is something called delta hedging. So this might sound a little bit complicated, but basically it's bullish as fuck. That's why you need to pay attention to it and understand how it's working. So I want to take just a few minutes to explain what delta hedging is in the simplest way possible, just so you understand, even if you're not involved in the market, what's going on here, just to educate, because that's what this channel is about. And of course, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. And if you want to keep in touch with me after I depart from social media after this bull run, because my message is pretty much cooked right now, right? Get to one Bitcoin. It's pretty much impossible now for anyone who's low single-digit millions to get to one Bitcoin, because most people don't have $100,000 of liquidity. When I first started buying Bitcoin, 10 Bitcoin was $50,000, and now it's $1 million, right? So when you think about how many low single-digit millionaires, right, $2, $3, $4 million in net worth, how many people actually have $90,000 of liquidity, $99,000 of liquidity to put into a speculative asset that they just heard about? Not many, right? And especially when you get to 10 Bitcoin, I mean, you got to put up $1 million of liquidity. We're now talking about 10 Bitcoin is only, really truly accessible by a person who's got a $15 to $20 million net worth. Right? And that's if they really get on the bandwagon really quickly. Otherwise, it's going to price them out too. And so, if you want to keep in touch after I leave social media, go to the link in the description about my newsletter for those people who have got to above one Bitcoin. Because if you haven't got there, your job is to get to one fucking Bitcoin. You get to one Bitcoin or you die trying, right? So that's the message overall. But talking about IBIT and its options, $1.9 billion of volume in the first day, and how delta hedging works. It's very, very simple. I'm going to make it simple for you. if the market maker sells you a call option, and a call option is basically saying that I want you to hold this and I have the right to buy it from you at this price on this day. So what people are doing is, let's say you think Bitcoin's going to go to 300,000. So they're saying that I want to buy Bitcoin at 150,000, but I want you to hold it until then, and I'm going to give you a small premium to do that. Just a standard trade like that, right? So if they sell me that option, let's say I want to buy that. Let's say I think Bitcoin is going to 300,000. I want to buy an option to buy Bitcoin at 150,000. Well, the thing that people miss is that the market maker actually has to go and hedge that trade, because they may actually have to deliver the Bitcoin that I've bought, right? That I've asked for. They can't just have it. They can't just sell an unlimited amount of these things without hedging the downside. So what they do is they hedge the delta. Let me just see what's going on here. Why is this bugging out? Right. They hedge the delta, which is the rate of the change on my ownership of that call option. And how can they do that? They do that by buying the underlying. So just think about what's going on here. I buy a call option, right? So I haven't bought the underlying, I've bought a call option. The market maker that sold me that call option has to go and own a little bit of that underlying asset in order to, just in case I ask for those shares. The market maker goes and buys IBIT. Guess what IBIT does with that money? IBIT goes ahead and buys Bitcoin with it. And then guess what happens? So they buy Bitcoin with it. The price of Bitcoin goes up, because if it's to the long side, the price of Bitcoin goes up. And now suddenly the value of my call option goes up, which means the delta has changed, which means they've got to hedge that increased delta. So now they have to go buy more of the underlying asset to hedge the delta. And if 80% of the transactions here are on the call side, well, you can clearly see how this is turning into a flywheel effect on the options market. And yeah, MicroStrategy's $42 billion are absolutely amazing, and it's phenomenal, and I love the business strategy. I'm invested in it, as you guys know. But the options market is $2.4 trillion a day worth of liquidity. And they're now going to figure out all of the options trading that's available on Bitcoin through the ETFs and figure out that it's better than buying SPY call options or better than buying QQQ call options. And there's going to be all these strategies that are developed by professional traders and things like that, which is going to start this flywheel effect. And as we saw it, right, the first day they started trading, the market went up tremendously. And part of that is going to be the market makers going and delta hedging that position. This is what they do. They're professionals at this. So this is just that simple understanding is going to tell you what's actually going on here. Now, the beautiful thing about this web that's been created, if you haven't watched my last video, I talked about the idea of this web that's been created in Bitcoin, is that while all these flywheels are going on, there is a synergistic effect that's happening. Because let's say I buy a call option, and now the market maker goes and buys the underlying to delta hedge that position. The underlying is IBIT. IBIT buys Bitcoin. Bitcoin goes up. Therefore, not only does my call option go up in value, which means I have to delta hedge more, but MSTR's Bitcoin stack also goes up in price because it's the same asset. So that now allows MSTR to go and borrow more money from the convertible bond market, which then means that they buy more Bitcoin, which increases the delta on my position, which means that the market maker has to go in, buy more Bitcoin to hedge it. Which also means that as more people see MicroStrategy buy more Bitcoin, they will come over to IBIT and they will buy more call options because they think the price is going to go up, which then forces IBIT on the market maker to buy more IBIT to delta hedge the position that they've just taken, which then increases the value of MicroStrategy's position, which then allows them to go and buy more Bitcoin and get more debt from the convertible bond market. This is the flywheel effect. There's multiple flywheels happening here, and they're all synergistic. This is the first two flywheels that have been set up here. You've got the bond market flywheel with MSTR. You've now got the options market flywheel with IBIT and all these options that are coming in from GBTC. All the funds have options on them now. And there's one big one coming. and hopefully that comes, Q2, Q3 of next year. And that is the nation state flywheel. Because if America announces a strategic reserve, now China has to say that they own enough Bitcoin to compete with America. Now Russia has to say that they own enough Bitcoin to keep with America, to compete with America and China. And then India has to get involved. So now you have a flywheel going on there, because if India sees that America buys, 200,000 Bitcoin, now I have to buy, 50,000, right? And bear in mind, as America buys 200,000 Bitcoin, because of the nature of the asset, the finality of the asset, and the scarcity of the asset, what does it do? It increases the value of my IBIT position and the value of my call options, which then increases the need to delta hedge those call options, which then means the market maker has to buy more IBIT, which then goes and buys more Bitcoin, which at the same time increases MicroStrategy's balance sheet, because they own Bitcoin, it's the same asset. So now MicroStrategy has the ability to go and borrow more money from the convertible debt market, do more ATM sales, etc., which then forces the price of that Bitcoin to go up further because they've bought it, which then forces the market maker on the option side to further delta hedge, which then makes the nation state have to print more money in order to buy more Bitcoin, which means that the other nation states have to compete with that, etc., etc. And you can see how these flywheels are starting to synergistically attack this one asset. Previously, this has been done with equities, real estate, etc., etc., except the difference with Bitcoin, as I've been trying to shout about for a year and a half, is that Bitcoin is the same asset, whether you are in Manhattan, whether you are in Shanghai, whether you are in Moscow. It is the exact same asset, which means these flywheels are no longer nation borders, nothing. They're based on the scarcity of the asset. And Bitcoin is the scarcest asset humanity has ever found. So I want you to understand this. The IBIT options news is bigger than the MSTR news, because of the sheer size of the market. You're talking about $2.4 trillion a day worth of liquidity. And by the way, the biggest option purchases that were going on was the December 2024, next month, $100 strikes on IBIT. And a $100 strike on IBIT, if IBIT gets to $100 a share, it represents Bitcoin being $175,000. So you can see how the market is starting to think about this and why this is an institutional world now and what's going on here. The MicroStrategy trade is phenomenal. That's its own flywheel over here. The IBIT and the options is another one over here. The market makers. And then you've got the third flywheel that's coming into play, which is the nation states. And all of these will work synergistically to attack Bitcoin. And that's why, by the way, when I say attack Bitcoin, I mean try and take as much Bitcoin as possible. I don't mean attack it to destroy it. And remember how many morons there were saying, oh, BlackRock's going to get into Bitcoin, put all their clients into it just to crash the price and destroy Bitcoin. Absolute utter morons, right? This is all benefiting BlackRock, by the way, right? Because they obviously own all of the companies that are doing the acquisition. They own all the miners. They own the ETF. They're generating fees on that. They're owning everything. They own the whole board here. They own MSTR. They own everything. So they own a piece of everything. And of course, as all of this is happening, as the price of Bitcoin goes up, guess who's making more fees? BlackRock, because they've got the ETF, right? So the value of the holding in the ETF goes up. As the value in the holding of the ETF goes up, BlackRock can now promote to their clients that this is outperforming, and therefore they should put more money into it. As more money comes into that, all these other vehicles have to kick up as well. So this is the flywheel effect that's happening. This is the $2.4 trillion a day worth of US liquidity that's just been opened up. And now, as we are sitting here, there are 4 capital pools, and that sums up to $725 trillion worth of liquidity on a yearly basis. $725 trillion worth of liquidity that now has an escape hatch to Bitcoin in one form or another. This is a phenomenal development. It is the single biggest news. MicroStrategy is fine, but it has scale inefficiencies, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? So as they're scaling up, they have to prove the case, etc., etc. The options market, you don't need to do that. You just buy options, right? So pay attention to this, understand this, learn this. This is the advanced world of what's going on here, not just the simplified buy Bitcoin argument that's happening. But ultimately, you've got to get to your 1 Bitcoin. You've got a very, very short amount of time to do it now. We're in that period where in a 2-week window, you're going to price out so many people. It's going to be unbelievable, because if people worth a couple $1 million don't have $100,000 of liquidity, they definitely don't have $200,000 of liquidity. So they're basically priced out of the game now. And then soon we're going to price out the higher single-digit millionaires, because I don't know many people who have $8 million net worth that also have $200,000 or $300,000 of cash lying around to put into a quote-unquote speculative asset, right? I don't know that many people that at that level that have that available. So ultimately, share this video, get this message out there so people understand exactly what is going on here. Subscribe to the channel, but just remember, there's always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.